Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. How is everyone doing? I'm going to tell you this. I'm recording this intro days early for once. Not midnight the night before it drops, days early. So you know what? Feeling a little sunnier. Maybe I'm not going to start out this episode with a dystopian musing or some kind of dive into melancholia. Let's just concentrate on the ever-shrinking positive stuff in our life, like today's episode. This is great. This is Rafael Toral. And if you don't know who Rafael is, I'm going to tell you his bio right now. Born in Lisbon in 1967, musician Rafael Toral has been intrigued by the potential of sound and the functions of music since he was a teenager. Working with electric guitar and electronics, in the 1990s, he pioneered a blend of ambient and rock and recorded acclaimed albums like Wavefield or Violence of Discovery and Calm of Acceptance. In 2004, he began the ambitious 15-year project entitled Space Program, which used experimental instruments to explore an approach to electronic music based on silence. Rafael has performed and recorded with everyone from Jim O'Rourke to Alvin Lucier. Lucier or Lucier? Apologies, Alvin. Phil Niblock, Sonic Youth, and so many more. And his latest album, Spectral Evolution, a synthesis of everything he's explored over the course of his career, was just released in February on Drag City, and it's fantastic. I've been listening to Rafael's music since my friend Luke introduced me to him in college. But I gotta say, Spectral Evolution, goddamn, I've just been listening to that over and over again. It's so good. It's what made me want to reach out and actually get in touch with Rafael in the first place. And I'm so glad I did. We talk about the musical experiences in his childhood that made him interested in the concept of sound in the first place. We talk about the political climate in Portugal when he was a kid. So basically there had been a decades-long authoritarian regime that, when he was about 7, was overthrown in a coup d'etat called the Carnation Revolution. So we talk about how this new revolution opened up so many possibilities for him, closed off other kinds of possibilities, and so much more. It was a very cool talk. I'm really glad we got the chance to chat. And listeners, if you are a new listener to the show, what I like to do here in the beginning is a little recommended if you like. Okay, say you're here. You like Rafael's music, and you're like, I like this chat. I want to hear other interviews you've done with musicians like Rafael. But Andy, you've been doing this show over 14 years. There's too many. How do I find these interviews? Well, I'm going to tell you some people right now. You can Google them. I don't know how else you search for them. But if you like today's talk, you might like the interviews I've done with Thurston Moore, Terry Riley, Arda Lindsay, David Harrington from Kronos Quartet, Bill Orchid, Zena Parkins, Rob Mazurek, Oren M. Barchi, and so many more writers and performers and comedians and actors and so on and so forth. So check out all those episodes, subscribe, leave a review if you can. I mean, on Spotify, look, I'm not saying Spotify is great, but it's there. And if that's what you use, why not click 5 stars? What else? At Andy Beckerman on social media. We don't have to talk about Twitter. I guess jokes on Blue Sky. Pictures of the animals and Naomi on Instagram. I have a free Substack where I try to write comedic philosophy about our collapsing empire. It's called The Slow Dystopia, theslowdystopia.substack.com. I don't write very often, maybe 5 or 6 times a year. All right, got some cool interviews coming up, so stay tuned for those. But for now, let's talk to Rafael. How are you? It's evening where you are.
It's late afternoon. It's the days are getting longer, so it's not quite evening yet.
Yeah. How do you feel? Like what's going on inside? I'm anxious. I'll let you know where I am. I'm anxious. They've been renovating the apartment below us, and they turned the gas off, and they accidentally turned the gas off in our apartment. So I've been trying to figure that out. Now it's my problem. So that's where I am.
Oh,
That's where I'm coming from.
well, they'll fix it at some point. Yeah, I've been recording and mixing as I usually am, and just took a break and have a snack before joining you. So yeah, I'm curious. I think the theme of your interviews is very. I think it's very refreshing in a way. Kind of unusual. It's not like a regular interview or about current matters. And the last days I've been trying to exercise my memory about the early stuff. But you'll ask a question, so it'll come out.
Well, let me start there, because I think that is interesting. Because I know that when I'm being interviewed, I think about what the person might ask me, and then I start thinking about answers already. And I'm kind of curious, knowing what I talk about on the show, what were the things that popped into your head first when you're like, oh, he's going to ask me about my childhood? What popped up first?
Well, I knew you would ask about my early experiences or early whatever is the earliest memories I have of something that relates to what I'm doing today. And I remembered, I don't know how old I was. So I have two older brothers, and they would listen to music all the time. So I was too young to go out and buy records or make choices. So I would just listen to whatever they listened to. And I remember at some point one of the records that got played a lot was Led Zeppelin the Third. And there's a transition between two tracks, the second and the third, before Celebration Day, in which there's now I know it's like a synthesizer with a filter opening and closing, kind of doing a sort of wah-wah effect, and it's just one tone and it bends down slowly. So I think it was meant to sound like a propeller airplane passing overhead with a Doppler effect. And it came out in '70, so I was 3 years old. This was probably later, but I remember thinking, oh, that's interesting. To have this kind of sound in a music record. And I wouldn't be able to tell whether it was a recording of an airplane or a fake. Now I know. But that is probably the earliest thing that I remember related to to what could there be in music that would later be inspiring. But yeah, at that time I was really far from having any ideas about being a musician or make music or anything at all. I just found it interesting in an articulate way.
No, for sure. You saying that made me really think about when I was a kid, and so I was a child in the 80s, but I had my parents' Beatles albums to listen to. And I just remember you saying that just made me really think about how much of the psychedelic era of Beatles, right? So Sgt. Pepper's, Magical Mystery Tour, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yellow Submarine. There were all these just different sounds that were in that, and how much that actually got into me, into my body, in a way that I wonder if people born before us or people who did not grow up listening to, hey, we're going to have like horn sounds. I mean, like honking sounds or whatever, or like traffic sounds, like that kind of stuff. Or like the synthesizer in Led Zeppelin that sounded like a propeller. Like,
or an actual jet airplane back in USSR.
Yeah. That's just part of musical vocabulary for me, that you can just have sounds outside of instruments as part of the landscape. And it seems natural to me in a way. I wonder if other people who that's weird or something like that for them. I don't know. Have you thought about how that actually, you said it, which is interesting to you. How did that slight interest as a child blossom later on?
I can't really find the connection. Only like in hindsight or hindsight, how do you pronounce? Like looking back, I see a connection, but not then. Yeah, it's too remote to there to be a connection between those early memories. I also listened to a lot of Beatles. Actually, I knew all the Beatles records, and like my one of my brothers had an acoustic guitar, and he would play songs, and he had this Beatles song album, The Beatles Complete, which had the chord charts for every single Beatles song. And like I was around 12 by then, and I still didn't think I would be a musician, but I picked up the guitar and learned a lot of Beatles songs. There were a few ones with difficult chord changes, and I wouldn't play those. But my earliest contact with making music was playing Beatles songs when I was 12. And I played a lot. Of them.
Yeah. Did your brothers have any other influence on you besides having this stuff around? Did they directly introduce things to you, or was it just there in the house for you to discover on your own?
It was more like it was there. I mean, they were really enthusiastic about bands they loved, especially the Beatles. And like my middle brother is 4 years older than me, so he wouldn't bother to introduce me to whatever stuff he would like. But he enjoyed that I would be into the same stuff as well. And yeah, mostly there was like when you're 12 and your brother is 16, it's a huge gap.
Yeah.
And so it was not a very active link. But I got to know and listen a lot to stuff from Janis Joplin, Beach Boys, Stones, Doors, later Yes. Lots of stuff from that time.
Mm-hmm. But yet, so at 12, right, there's no desire to be a musician. What was did you have a desire to be something, or was it just you were just a child and you were existing in childhood?
I remember dreaming about being a pilot, an airplane pilot, and that never happened. Actually, later I still considered joining the Air Force or something to learn, but I had the glasses and there was like a sight restriction. So if you wear glasses, you're not supposed to.
Right.
So okay.
Right.
I'm glad I didn't.
Well, that's what happened to my friend. He ended up in the Army but he really wanted to fly. And he had taken like flight lessons, all this stuff, but then because of his glasses, he would never have been allowed to. So he ended up joining the army instead, and then going that direction.
Yeah, it didn't happen with me.
But it was just a pipe dream. It was never something you seriously considered. It was just kind of like, oh, that would be nice.
Yeah, like childhood fantasies.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, take me back, because I was trying to figure out, or trying to think about what it might have been like growing up. So, you're kind of born into the tail end of like a dictatorship that's kind of like starting to fall apart.
Yeah.
And by the time you're 7 or so, that's when there's a revolution, like a left-leaning revolution. Mm-hmm. Were you aware of what was going on? Could you tell? Or was it just like things that happening at a distance and you were more aware of what was going on, say, in your family or in your school or something like that?
Well, it was all over the place. You couldn't look away. And I was in school on that day, so the teacher got us all an assignment to make a drawing about the revolution. So there was all this imagery of a carnage, the flower. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was known as the Carnage Revolution because the military, there was a flower saleswoman that started distributing carnages to the military, and they would put it on their guns, on the pipe. What's the tube that sticks out of a gun?
The barrel.
Oh, the barrel. Yeah. So there was all this imagery of tanks with carnages all over, and the military partying with the people in the streets. So it was a lot of euphoria in the streets. But I didn't get to witness any of that, and my parents were more on the conservative side, so they were not super enthusiastic about it. So yeah, it was. I would see stuff on the TV, but not much. There was not a lot of engagement. I was like 6 years old, so I wouldn't quite realize what was going on and what ended and what was beginning.
Right.
So there was this whole military party.
Yeah, because I was trying to think. I'm like, because really, you grow up after this revolution happens. You grow up in the wake of this new kind of regime. And what I was really trying to think about was, because here in America, we're going the opposite direction. And I can see from the earlier half of my life, I can see horizons closing. I can see it, not necessarily for myself, but for other people. I can kind of see how things are closing up and how people are becoming more fearful and how people are becoming more quiet and less courageous around me. And I'm kind of curious, growing up in the opposite of that, did you see possibilities blossom for you? And I know you're only 6 at the time, but by the time you're a teenager, do you see certain possibilities open up that maybe hadn't been there before? Or do people of your parents' generation, are they talking about how things are more open? Or I'm just kind of curious about what is the atmosphere as you are becoming a teenager?
There was overall more permissiveness, like in a school environment. But I was not in a active age, having projects and doing stuff that would have been forbidden 10 years before or so. But yeah, all I had to do was just go through school, and I did experience like the first year of elementary school. There was a tougher discipline, so you're supposed to memorize a lot of stuff. Otherwise, you'd get beaten up in your hand with with a wooden ruler. But there was no. I didn't have any experience of anything to compare the environment with, so I would just take it for granted. Whatever you want to do, you could do. On the other hand, Portugal was very isolated up until the revolution, and culturally it took a lot of time to catch up. For instance, later I produced an anthology of Portuguese electronic music, and all these European countries have their own studios and history of electronic music all the way since the 50s. And in Portugal there was absolutely nothing, and whatever there was were like a few, 2 or 3 Portuguese composers that managed to go to France or Belgium and access electronic music studios and did some work there. But it was just nothing. There's no early history of electronic music in Portugal. That's just an example. And if you're a teenager and you start playing music and be in bands, it was all very, the pre-internet days of swapping cassettes and playing live in the most amazing conditions, like in bars or really no matter where. And I remember there was like a normal circuit with the press, venues, labels. There was nothing. There was just like the mainstream labels that would put out mainstream music. But it was already hard in itself, but in the first 15 years after the revolution, so I started being really interested in music by 83, and that's more or less around the time where I decided to be a musician. So that was pretty early on, but up until say the 90s, it was quite bleak. The opportunities you'd have namely as a musician, to thrive doing work were very very limited. It was all very underground, very. It was an environment that you would get by if you were stubborn enough. So at that time, around 15 years after the revolution, there was still not there was no circuit like venues and labels and press and any supportive environment for new things to pop up.
So that's what's really fascinating then. Was it that there was this unexplored area that you could be a pioneer in? Was that part of the appeal? You said there were no electronic musicians. There were very few. There was no real history. It was just a kind of blank canvas. Was there something exciting about that?
Well, no, not exciting at all. But there was. It's not like there was nothing. There was people working, and there was just the conditions were difficult. There was no. It wouldn't be easy to get by, to make records, to tour, to to have any press coverage. Even if when I began doing stuff, it all happened pretty quickly, but it was mostly kids playing together. in several bands and trying things out. And on the other hand, it was pretty much trying to, to some extent emulate or be inspired by the bands that we were listening to at the time. And there was, there was like a radio show that broadcast music from these 80s bands. And that was very inspiring. I think that was the key for me to start taking music seriously. Because I loved that music to a point where I was amazed by how I felt when I heard the music, and then I think I decided I want to be in touch with whatever is loaded with this, these feelings, this emotional atmosphere. That if you listen to something and you feel it, I want to be part of that. I want to be able to make something that has some kind of contact with that notion.
Yes. Yeah, okay. I get that from your music. So it was really like, okay, it was not exciting to be a pioneer. It was difficult going. So then it really has to be that this feeling, this desire to connect emotionally was so overpowering, because if the other stuff was so difficult, right, then it had to, like that had to be so present in you. Is that, am I getting it right?
Yeah, it was. Well, we have to step back. When I had this, when it dawned on me that I wanted to be in touch with making music, I really had no experience at all of making it or going out there and sharing it. I just had a tape recorder, a cassette, like one of those portable tape recorders with a speaker on, and I had a guitar and not much else. So it was not like I would be able to realize, oh, this is hard. It was not. It's just just start doing stuff and just make it from there. But about this idea of pioneering, there was already experimental music going on in the early 80s. It's like some older people, like bands like Telectu, and also Nuno Canavarro was already, and Nuno Rebelo, who is someone I met and introduced me to the other Nuno. They were already making stuff and experimenting. So those would be my closest references that I would look up to, and not that I would. We're talking about when I was, well, at this point I was like 18. But it's not like I would want to follow their footsteps. But there was this really strong inspiration about possibilities. Like this older guy that welcomes me into his house and shows me his 4-track cassette recorder, and shows me a record of John Cage's Prepared Piano. And I was like, whoa, what is this? Like lots of, that was really crazy. Like when you're 17 and you've never heard of anything like that. So there was a lot of mind-blowing experiences of older musicians that I was in touch with, showing me stuff that I had never heard about.
Yeah.
Like he had like a feedback piece that he recorded, like his cassette 4 tracks with a microphone and a speaker, and he did like a feedback piece with melodic shapes and stuff. And this guy is just a genius. And all this stuff was really really amazing. And I wouldn't know what's going on in the world to have any notion about what was pioneering and what was not.
Right.
Because I had access to people who were active in Lisbon, but I knew like the rest of the world was out there, and there was lots of stuff and history to learn about. I remember when I started like doing music on my own, that all I wanted was to make music that I heard in my head. That wasn't there for me to listen, and
Yes.
And just try to materialize it.
Yes.
But I just had like the impression that I had was that I just tried hard to get by and to make something that made sense. Yeah, to just make something out of it, out of all these ideas.
Okay. I want to investigate that, because that to me is an interesting thing. You could have just created music in the same mold that everyone else was creating. And what I'm curious about is, what was it in you that made you want to deviate from that? Like, I remember when you were talking about John Cage, I remember when I was in college, like maybe I was 19, and I saw a performance of, is it Music for 18 Musicians? Is that the Steve Reich piece?
Yes.
Yes. And it changed things for me. It completely opened up possibilities that I didn't know were there before. And then I went down that certain path. I went down a path where I'm like, oh, this is you can do certain things with music that I didn't think were possible before. Whereas someone else could have heard that and been like, this sucks. I want to go listen to Billy Joel or whatever, right? No, no shade to Billy Joel. It's fine. I don't have a problem with it. I'm just saying that, like, there are, certain things when you hear, let's say, non-pop music or non-popular music, if we're saying, whatever kind of like category I'm trying to elicit here, there are certain things in people where you'll like go and travel down that path. And maybe we can like go back a little bit, because you were saying that your parents were politically conservative. Were they conservative otherwise? Were they kind of buttoned down? Like, what were your parents like when you were younger?
Well, regular working class, not necessarily, with strong political convictions. Yeah, I wouldn't say there was like any influence from there, except maybe that I borrowed money from my father to buy my first guitar that I saw in a flea market, and I fell in love with it, and I still have it. And he lent me the money, and then he regretted it. Oh, there you go with your petty little music that's going nowhere. And he didn't really try to discourage me, but he wasn't encouraging at all. And my mother the same. They only started paying attention when they started seeing newspaper articles on me. Oh, that's serious. And so I was. They still didn't enjoy it, but I became sort of more legitimate. But I was in my 20s back then. By then,
did that bother you that they were indifferent? Let's say, did you want them to be into it, or were you like, I don't care what they say, it doesn't matter to me?
Well, you always want to be accepted. So yeah, that wasn't like a favorable environment or encouraging, but yeah, I just didn't care. Just okay, too bad.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to figure out again is like you pursued it anyway, right? In the face of indifference, and so it either didn't matter to you, or the feeling, the desire to pursue this was so overpowering that it pushed past that, right? Because there are plenty of people who would be discouraged and would just stop, or would eventually it would peter out.
Oh no, it was clear that I knew I wouldn't be making music for the kind of people that my parents were. So they weren't, my first audience, or I wouldn't think of, people like them would be pleased with what I was trying to do. So yeah, it didn't have much of an effect. It just not as nice as if they were into it, but
right.
Do it anyway. So.
No, I get it. My parents, very lovely people, but do not understand what I do, and seemingly up until maybe like the last year or two, were not interested in finding out. So now I'm in my 40s, and now they're kind of slightly curious that I have some kind of, I make a living writing and doing entertainment. So they finally started asking questions. But up until now, from age of, let's see, when did I get I've got a guitar when I was like 16, 15, somewhere around there. From then until about 2 years ago, it was just like, what is this stuff he's doing? So it did, like why I asked that was because it did sting, and it still does sting a little bit. But my desire to make things seems to overpower almost everything else. And I'm not even sure where it comes from in me. Other than like maybe for me, arrogance, I don't know, God complex, something like that. But that's why I'm curious at other people, where it's just like, oh, that like this is something that like spoke to you deeply.
And it's curious that you were talking about pioneering stuff. And when I started making music, I was totally into Brian Eno, and this whole idea of my first contact was, I was like 15, and I went to a record shop, and there was a copy of Discrete Music, and I didn't hear it until much later, but I read the liner notes in the back cover, and I was, wow, this is really something. I want to be doing stuff which relates to these ideas, to setting up some kind of system, and the music unfolds by itself, and you become an audience. And then I heard other records of his that I loved, and my first efforts were pretty much trying to make sense of these ideas, and I didn't quite understand everything. Like another record that I was very inspired by that had this text in the back cover was Let the Power Fall by Robert Fripp, the Frippertronics album, in which he had like a list of principles, very schematic, very very rational, like the appropriate structure will recognize other structures within itself, and the A, B, C, and like a whole manifesto. And I didn't quite understand what he meant, but I was, you can think systematically about structures. That's that's like the gist of what I got when I read it for the first time. Yeah, and the first pieces I wrote with the guitar that ended up in Sound Mind, Sound Body came out of that. Like I was 18 when I started working on them, and for me it always remained this album of me trying to make sense of things and trying to come up with something that was, that I made it myself, and trying to materialize some of these ideas. and I never quite understood why people liked it so much.
Huh.
And there was like it was Jim reissued it on CD, and it sold like crazy, and people were like, you know, really enthusiastic about it, and I was like, well, I was just trying to get by. It's nothing. And only recently I realized that there was not that many people working with guitar with this kind of interest in this with this kind of focus that I was having, and I had the disadvantage and the advantage of being very isolated in Portugal. There was not a lot of information circulating, so I would focus on something, and the focus would be really sharp because there was no distractions. And yeah, only recently I realized that, wow, probably there was not a lot of stuff happening like this before.
Right.
And the same with Wavefield, that I was more conscious of, you know, bringing different things together, besides a renewed interest in ambient music, but I was also trying to make a dirty kind of ambient with distortion and with the kind of sound from rock music.
Right.
And I was also really mesmerized by having learned about I'm Sitting in the Room by Alvin Lucier, and this whole idea of space becoming music through resonance.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was, it just blew my mind.
Yeah.
And yeah, a lot of things came together for the how the idea for this album to arise, and one of the main clicks was when I went to see Nirvana in Lisbon, like it was their last tour in '93. And the opening band was the Buzzcocks. And the concert was in a sports pavilion with really bad acoustics. And eventually Nirvana sounded great, but the Buzzcocks, the sound was really, really horrible. Like they were playing and I could just hear, and it was just completely amorphous. And then I started noticing, oh, this is interesting. This kind of sound is like liquefied rock music. It's just the vibration. It's completely inarticulate. That, like,
yeah.
I couldn't hear any beats or words or licks or anything. It's just just a wash of sound. And I just on that day, I thought I want to make a record that sounds like this. And I was listening to, you know, Sonic Youth and My Bloody Valentine and Alvin Lucier and all these sources came together on that record.
Okay, what I'm about to say is psychologically reductive on purpose, more as a conversation starter. But it seems like, just from us talking for a little bit, that, you know, without there being a kind of foundation for you to be the next generation of, right? You were kind of given some kind of freedom to just explore what felt good to you, right? And so you just went in whatever direction. And I'm wondering, is, you know, this desire at the beginning where you're like systems, right? You like the idea of systems and systematizing stuff. Is that your attempt to put some kind of order on this freedom? Or is it just, you're just following whatever kind of felt good to you?
Yeah, I didn't have any notion of freedom. It was, it was just trying to, again, to come up with something that made sense to do. And there was, you know, generations before me, but it's not it's not like I felt that I had any obligation to follow any path. Like those people were doing their stuff, and I was listening to, you know, other things. They wouldn't be listening to, you know, to Sonic Youth. It was my generation that was into that kind of bands, or and yeah, maybe I think I was fortunate to be in touch with all these disparate influences from Eno and Cage and Lucier and the rock bands, and just, you know, some chemistry happened about yeah, it really, it's not just that made sense, it was like a call, you know, this needs to be done, and I still have that. It's just that I feel obliged to materialize things that are not there, and that I have all the drive and information to make it happen, even if I don't have resources. It's just a drive that I can't stop, that I must do this because it's not there. So if I can do it, I will do it.
Yeah, no, I get that. What was the economic situation like that allowed you? You know, you said you came from a working class background. So how were you able to pursue something that was particular, that was very, you know, I'm manifesting something that's in my head that doesn't exist out in the world, really?
Well, up until at that time, I was still in at my parents', so I didn't, you know, I didn't have to worry about paying a rent, and I didn't have these kind of concerns until, well, actually, not much later, I got a job, and I left my parents. So, and yeah, the situation was that the job income was enough to get by, and I didn't have a lot of expenses related to music. I just had basic gear, and at the time I was already playing gigs, so whatever money that came from gigs was extra money that I could spend on gear, on pedals or new guitars or recorders, whatever. So, but in the beginning, I would when I got a job, I was still at my parents', and I could raise money to buy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it was not, you know, it was not a very wealthy situation at all, but it was not too hard either.
Yeah. What's fascinating about this is that as we're talking, there's just a series of obstacles that are in your way that a lot of people might be like, this is too much, it's not enough. But again, this drive that we keep talking about is so powerful in you that these obstacles are not insurmountable in any way, right? So what I'm wondering is what happens when you don't get to exercise this drive? Like, are there moments in your life where you're like, I need to create something, but I don't have the ability to do it at this moment? Like, what happens internally in you?
Well, that happened quite recently when I was producing Spectral Evolution, the new album that came out. And it was very ambitious, and to make it, I needed to know things that I didn't know, because I am not formally trained as a musician. I'm self-taught, and I had to deal with harmony, and I had to learn a lot and study how to connect chords together in a way that makes sense in in this kind of orchestration with guitar drones. And yeah, it felt quite frustrating and almost painful to have this sequence of chords, and I record them and they're correct, but they don't sound right, and I don't know why. So I go to study and I learn stuff like about voice leading and chord voicings and stuff. And okay, so let's do it again. And I do it again, and it's okay, much better, but still not there. So why? and I wouldn't know what to change. What was I knew what I had in my head and how I wanted it to sound, but I didn't know enough to go there and tweak whatever needed to be adjusted. And I couldn't stop anyway, because it was really like it was a promise. This record was clearly something that could be really it could be big in a way, that I could achieve being able to finish it and make it what it is. And I just had to struggle against my own limitations, and experimenting and studying and just pushing it all the time. And this took like 2 years, and it was really hard. But in the end I did it.
Yeah it's amazing. It's very well worth the effort that you put into it. Okay, we're right at the end, and I just want to go back a little bit because I'm curious. You said around 1983 was when music became the thing. You had like an epiphany, I guess you said, right? And I'm kind of curious about leading up to that. Was there any direction in your life? Were you just kind of like all over the place and you didn't know what you were going to do?
No, I didn't really worry so much because I was just, doing school. So I was just supposed to carry on with that. That was my, responsibility to just, do year after year and just go forward with regular school. Yeah, so I wasn't really thinking so much about what I wanted to do professionally. I eventually became a sound engineer, but that was because I already had some studio experience, and I really loved mixing desks and recorders and microphones and all that stuff. So I was fortunate that it made sense, like the job made sense. But yeah, that was after being a musician. So yeah, I was fortunate about not having had to worry too much about getting a job when I was a teenager.
Yeah,
that was just a normal thing of just getting school right.
Yeah, because you seem like a very thoughtful person. So I was just kind of curious, like, did you just kind of exist and then you had this epiphany? Or were you like, I have to apply myself and like I have to think about what I want to do, and that's kind of how it happened? Like, I'm just trying to figure out.
No, it's just enjoying music and listening to this radio show and just observing how strong it got, like the experience of listening, and I just observed. It was really a strong experience, and it really motivated me to step forward in the direction of being in touch with that.
Wow. That's amazing. Just to have such an overpowering experience that it directs the rest of your life is really interesting.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This was such a pleasure to talk to you.
It was a pleasure too. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bio, 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 bio.